The tragedy of Karbala, a legacy of sacrifice and truth. In the annals of Islamic history, there exists a moment, one harrowing tragedy, that has echoed through the ages, stirring deep sorrow in the hearts of believers. It is a reminder of the immense price paid for upholding truth and justice, the tragedy of Karbala. This was the day when the blessed blood of the Prophet Muhammad, Imam Hussain, beloved grandson, was spilled upon the scorched sands of Iraq. Picture the year 680 AD, the 61st year after the Hijrah. The Muslim Ummah had already weathered many trials since the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. Political power had shifted, ambitions had grown, and under the rule of Yazid bin Muawiyah, unrest was spreading among the faithful. Among those discontented was none other than Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of the Messenger of Allah, Imam Hussain, son of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima al-Zahra, the luminous flower of the Prophet's household. Hussein was a man of profound integrity, known for his piety, justice, and his striking resemblance, both in appearance and in character, to his grandfather. The companions would often look upon him and feel as though they were once again in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. That year, the people of Kufa, disillusioned by Yazid's leadership, sought a ruler who embodied righteousness and moral clarity. They sent letter after letter to Hussein, pledging their allegiance and urging him to come to Kufa to lead them. Their assurances set in motion Hussein's fateful journey, accompanied by his family and a small group of loyal followers, toward Iraq, toward Kufa, and ultimately toward Karbala. But before we reflect on the battlefield of Karbala, it is essential to ground our understanding in the most authentic sources, not hearsay or exaggeration, but the firmest narrations preserved by the most reliable witnesses. One such account is found in Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 3748, narrated by the great companion Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, who served the Prophet ﷺ for 10 years and loved him dearly. Anas recounts the devastating aftermath of Hussein's martyrdom. He tells of how Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the governor appointed by Yazid, was presented with the severed head of Hussein, placed shamefully in a container and brought before him as if it were a trophy. In a vile display of cruelty, Ubaydullah began to strike the noble head with the tip of his staff, mocking Hussein's features, speaking arrogantly about his appearance. But Anas could bear no more. Grief and outrage overtook him, and he declared, his voice trembling, "Among all people, Hussein most resembled the Messenger of Allah." He reminded them that this was no ordinary man. This was the very face the Prophet Imam Hussain had once kissed with love, the face that had glowed under the light of revelation. Anas also noted that at the time, Hussein's hair was dyed with wasma, a plant-based dye that gave his noble face a dark, striking hue, further enhancing his resemblance. This scene, preserved in Sahih al-Bukhari, unveils both the brutality of those who desecrated the Prophet's family and the moral courage of those who stood against such injustice. It is not just a political story. It is the heart-wrenching tale of betrayal and loyalty, of cruelty and sacrifice. Karbala was not merely a rebellion, it was a stand against tyranny. It was an assault on the very soul of the Ummah, on the beloved family of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The road to Karbala, a nation at a crossroads. To this day, believers recall the tragedy of Karbala with heavy hearts and tearful remembrance. But to truly understand how such a calamity unfolded, we must go back to a pivotal moment in Islamic history. The passing of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan in the year 60 AH marked a turning point in the political landscape of the Muslim world. As the first caliph of the Umayyad dynasty, Muawiyah had consolidated power and established a centralized form of governance. Yet with his death, the mantle of leadership was passed to his son Yazid, a move that sent waves of concern through the ranks of senior companions and the broader Muslim community. Unlike the rightly guided caliphs, whose rule had been grounded in justice, consultation, shura, and devotion to Islamic principles, Yazid's rise to power was perceived as the beginning of a monarchy, hereditary rule foreign to the early spirit of Islam. His personal character and spiritual commitment were widely questioned, and many doubted his suitability to lead the Ummah. This unease was especially strong in Iraq, and most notably in Kufa, a city that had long been a center of dissent and political unrest. The memory of Ali ibn Abi Talib's leadership remained vivid in the hearts of the Kufans. Their affection for his family, the Al-Bayt, was deep-rooted, and to many, Yazid's rule was not only illegitimate, but a betrayal of the Prophet's legacy. In this atmosphere of discontent, the people of Kufa turned their gaze to Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. To them, Hussein was not just a noble descendant, he was the living embodiment of truth, justice, and prophetic values. They believed he could restore the moral compass of the caliphate. One by one, letters began pouring into Mecca, where Hussein resided. These were no mere formal invitations. They were heartfelt appeals, pledging unwavering allegiance and promising support. The Kufans urged Hussein to come and lead them, assuring him that tens of thousands were prepared to rise at his call. Their words spoke of a city ready to reject Yazid's authority and re-establish a caliphate built upon justice and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The volume of correspondence grew so large that bundles of letters arrived daily. The writers vowed loyalty, swore to defend Hussein with their lives, and painted an image of a people desperate for change and committed to righteous leadership. Yet despite he was no stranger to the political realities of Kufa, he knew of the city's instability and the historical unreliability of its people, who during the time of his father Ali had faltered when faced with real trials. As these messages reached him, so too did the voices of the senior companions, men of great wisdom and experience. Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, among others, sought to counsel Hussein. Their words were not political maneuvering but sincere, heartfelt warnings born out of deep love and concern. Ibn Abbas, in particular, reminded Hussein of how the Kufans had once failed his father. They had pledged allegiance to Ali but abandoned him in his most critical moments. He warned Hussein not to place his trust in promises inked on paper, promises that could crumble when tested by fear and pressure. Ibn al-Zubair too cautioned restraint, urging Hussein to weigh the risks carefully. These were not words of cowardice, but of foresight from those who had seen the tides of politics turn against even the noblest intentions. Yet Hussein, ever steadfast and spiritually attuned, placed his trust in Allah. He was not driven by ambition, but by a profound sense of duty, to uphold justice, to protect the integrity of the Ummah, and to refuse allegiance to a ruler who, in his view, compromised the moral foundation of Islam. The journey of conviction. Hussein's march to Karbala. In the quiet of the night, Hussein ibn Ali turned to prayer, seeking divine guidance for the path ahead. The calls for help from Kufa were sincere, echoing with the pain of an oppressed community yearning for justice. And while the wise counsel of the Prophet's companions weighed heavily on his heart, so too did the hopes of a people who saw in him a beacon of truth and righteousness. Balancing both, Hussein made his decision, not out of ambition, but out of duty to uphold truth, justice, and the honor of the Prophet's household, Salama. He resolved to answer the call. With calm determination, Hussein prepared for the journey to Iraq, accompanied not by an army, but by his family. Women, children, and a small group of devoted followers whose loyalty was rooted in their love for the Prophet, Salama, and unwavering commitment to truth. Though Mecca, the sacred sanctuary, offered security, Hussein knew it could no longer shelter him. The pilgrimage season was approaching, and rumors reached him that Yazid's agents might attempt to apprehend him, even within the holy precincts of the Kaaba. Hussein would not allow blood to be spilled in the Haram. The sanctity of that space and the dignity of his mission were too sacred. And so, trusting in Allah's decree, Hussein and his caravan departed Mecca, taking the desert route toward Kufa. Meanwhile, the news of Hussein's movement spread swiftly, reaching Damascus. Yazid, alarmed by the potential threat to his authority, acted quickly. He appointed the ruthless Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad as governor of opposition and prevent Hussein from gaining support. Ibn Ziyad wasted no time. Upon arriving in Kufa, he launched a campaign of intimidation and repression. He summoned tribal leaders, threatening them with severe consequences if they aided Hussein. Spies flooded the streets, watchful eyes tracked every word and movement, and those suspected of sympathizing with Hussein were swiftly imprisoned or silenced. The once hopeful city of Kufa, which had overflowed with letters of allegiance and dreams of righteous leadership, now fell into silence and fear. The tribal leaders, once vocal in their support, withdrew to protect their own families. The common people, who had once longed for Hussein's leadership, now watched from behind shuttered doors. Unaware of this betrayal, Hussein continued his journey, but the harsh truth soon reached him, news carried by messengers and finally confirmed by the fate of his cousin, Muslim ibn Aqil. Hussein had sent Muslim ahead to assess the situation in Kufa. Initially, Muslim was warmly welcomed. Thousands pledged their allegiance to Hussein through him. But as Ibn Ziyad's campaign of terror intensified, those promises evaporated. Muslim found himself abandoned, then captured, and ultimately executed. When the news of Muslim's death reached Hussein, the weight of what awaited him became clear. Kufa was no longer the city of loyalty it had once seemed. Still, Hussein did not turn back. The road behind him was closed, and his conscience would not allow retreat. To Hussein, this was not merely a political conflict. It was a test of faith, a stand for principle, and a refusal to bow to tyranny. With every step, he drew nearer to Karbala, to a destiny that would echo through history, not as a tale of defeat, but as a timeless testament to the sacrifice made for truth and justice. The final stand, the day of Ashura. Driven by unwavering devotion to the truth, Hussein ibn Ali continued onward, even as betrayal closed in around him. Yazid's forces, dispatched under the command of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, intercepted his caravan before it could reach Kufa. Though many soldiers hesitated to confront the beloved grandson of the Prophet Allah sallallahu, they were under strict orders. Loyalty to power, not principle, held their hands fast. The small caravan was eventually forced to halt on the barren plains of Karbala, a desolate land soon to be sanctified by sacrifice. There, under the blistering sun and against the vast horizon of parched earth, Hussein and his companions made camp. Not far from them flowed the Euphrates River, its life-giving waters now weaponized, cut off by Yazid's forces, denying the Prophet's family even the most basic human need. Surrounded by a sea of soldiers, Hussein's camp of only 72 souls, including children, women, and a handful of loyal men, faced the grim reality of siege and isolation. The people of Kufa, who had once flooded Hussein with letters of loyalty and desperate pleas for leadership, were now silent. Fear had choked their courage. The betrayal was total. But Hussein's resolve remained unbroken. He would not flee. He would not surrender. He would not legitimize tyranny, even if the cost was his life. He stood as a man of principle, of prophetic legacy, and of unshakable moral clarity. As the days passed, thirst and exhaustion gripped the camp. The children cried, their lips parched. The women grew faint from dehydration. Still, Hussein did not waver. He repeatedly sought to avoid bloodshed, offering peace and safe return, asking only that he be allowed to go back without conflict. But Yazid's orders were clear. There would be no peace. Hussein must either submit or die. In the enemy ranks, many hearts were torn. They knew who Hussein was. They remembered how the Prophet ﷺ had kissed him, how he had carried him on his shoulders, how he had declared, "Hussein is from me, and I am from Hussein." Yet fear and blind obedience to authority stilled their hands. On the eve of Ashura, Hussein gathered his companions. Under the starry desert sky, he addressed them with words of grace and courage. He released them from their oaths, reminding them that he alone was the target. They were free to go, but none departed. One by one, they rose to declare their loyalty anew. They would not leave him. They chose to stay, not for politics, not for power, but for love of the truth, for honor, for the Prophet's bloodline, and for Allah. That night was spent not in fear, but in worship. They prayed, recited Quran, and sought closeness to their Lord, preparing their souls for martyrdom. Then came the morning of the 10th of Muharram, Ashura. As the sun rose over the scorched earth of Karbala, its rays lit a scene of stark contrast. A small, steadfast band facing the might of thousands. Yet it was not numbers that defined this battle, but faith. One by one, Hussein's companions rode into battle, each knowing they would not return, yet fighting with a bravery and conviction that shook even the enemy ranks. The clash of steel rang across the plains, mingled with the cries of the faithful and the shouts of injustice defied. Though Yazid's army was vast, they faced a resistance unlike any other, not just men defending their lives, but souls defending truth. Hussein watched as his brothers, his nephews, his sons, and his companions fell, one after another, each martyring themselves for a cause greater than life itself. Yet the story was far from over. The martyrdom and the legacy. One by one, the brave men of Hussein's camp fell, each laying down their life for a cause greater than themselves. Sons, nephews, and dearest companions, every one of them martyred in the pursuit of truth. The battlefield, though soaked in sorrow, bore witness to a sacrifice unmatched in its purity. At last, Hussein stood alone. Weary, wounded, yet unyielding, he stepped forward to face the overwhelming force that surrounded him. His body bore the marks of many blows. His soul carried the weight of betrayal, but his dignity, his unwavering spirit, remained untouched. In his final moments, Imam Hussain, the beloved grandson of the Prophet, Alaihi Wasallam, fought with the valor of one whose cause was rooted in divine truth. Surrounded and exhausted, he was finally struck down. The sands of Karbala cradled his fallen body, battered, bloodied, and broken. His noble head was severed and taken to the tent of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, the governor of Kufa. And there, in an act of vile arrogance, it was placed before him in a container. According to an authentic narration found in Sahih al-Bukhari, it was reported by Anas ibn Malik that Ibn Ziyad began to strike Hussein's face with the tip of his cane, mocking the beauty that so closely resembled the Prophet Alaihi Wasallam. Unable to remain silent, Anas ibn Malik, heartbroken at the desecration before him, declared, "Among the Ahl al-Bayt, Hussein was the one who most resembled the messenger of Allah, Alaihi Wasallam, in face, in manner, and in speech."